There are moments in a marriage when everything changes in an instant. Not with shouting, not with a fight, but with a single sentence. Cold, calculated, and delivered like a business transaction. For one man in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, that moment came on a Tuesday night in late October. The leaves were turning gold outside their 2-story colonial home, the kind of place you'd see in a real estate ad promising the American dream. Inside, his wife sat on the edge of their bed, arms crossed, her face lit only by the glow of her phone screen. And without looking up, she said the words that would shatter everything. "I'm not sleeping with you anymore. Deal with it." Just like that. No explanation, no apology, no room for discussion. Deal with it. As if she were announcing a change in their Netflix subscription, not the end of their intimate life together. He stood there in the doorway, still holding his work bag, trying to process what he'd just heard. His mind raced through the past few months, the late nights, the distance, the coldness that had crept into their home like winter frost on a windshield. But hearing it said out loud, hearing her dismiss years of marriage with 3 casual words, felt like being punched in the chest by someone you thought would never raise a fist. She didn't even wait for his response. She simply stood up, grabbed her pillow, and walked past him toward the guest room down the hall. Her perfume, something new, something expensive he didn't recognize, lingered in the air as she disappeared around the corner. The door clicked shut, and in that moment, standing alone in the bedroom they'd shared for 8 years, he realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about sex. This was about power. This was about control. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a darker thought began to form. This was about someone else. But before we get to what happened next, before we talk about the evidence he'd gather, the prenup she'd forgotten, and the courtroom justice that would follow, we need to go back. We need to understand how 2 people who once promised forever could end up here. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about red flags ignored, sacrifices taken for granted, and the slow, painful process of watching someone you love become a stranger. Their story began the way so many American love stories do, with hope, possibility, and the kind of chemistry that makes you believe in destiny. They met at a 4th of July barbecue in their mid-20s, both young professionals trying to make it in a city full of ambitious climbers and weekend warriors. She worked in marketing for a growing tech company, always impeccably dressed, always networking, always on. He was in construction management, the kind of guy who could fix anything with his hands and never bragged about it. She was drawn to his quiet confidence, his stability, his lack of pretense in a world full of people performing for Instagram. He fell for her drive, her intelligence, and the way she laughed, fully, genuinely, throwing her head back like she'd never learned to hide her joy. Their first apartment was a cramped 1-bedroom in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which is real estate code for still a little sketchy but gentrifying fast. They ate takeout on a second-hand couch and argued about whether to hang her modern art prints or his vintage concert posters. They compromised on everything back then. She'd watch football with him on Sundays, and he'd go to her company happy hours, even though small talk with her colleagues made him feel like he was speaking a foreign language. They were building something together, brick by brick, dream by dream. When he proposed, it was nothing fancy. No flash mob, no viral video. Just the 2 of them on a weekend trip to the Blue Ridge Mountains, standing at an overlook as the sun set over the valley. He got down on one knee on the rocky trail, pulled out a modest ring he'd saved 6 months to buy, and asked her to be his partner for life. She said yes, with tears streaming down her face, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Everything felt possible. They got married the following spring in a ceremony at her parents' country club. It was her mother's event more than theirs. 200 guests, a sit-down dinner, a string quartet that cost more than his truck. Her family came from money, old Southern money that spoke in hushed tones about property values and investment portfolios. His family came from work, the kind of people who measured wealth and paid off mortgages and kids who made something of themselves. The wedding was beautiful, but he remembered feeling like a guest at someone else's party, smiling for photos while her father made jokes that weren't quite jokes about marrying down. But he pushed those feelings aside. He focused on her, on the way she looked walking down the aisle, on the promises they made to each other in front of God and everyone they knew, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. He meant every word. He believed she did too. They bought their first house 2 years into the marriage, a starter home in a decent school district, the kind of place where neighbors still waved from their driveways and kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sac. He threw himself into making it theirs, spending weekends painting rooms, building a deck in the backyard, planting a small garden by the fence. She focused on decorating, turning their house into something that looked like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine. She posted photos of every room online, carefully curated shots that got hundreds of likes from friends and strangers alike. Looking back now, he could see the early signs. The way she cared more about how things looked than how they felt. The way she'd reshoot a photo of their anniversary dinner 5 times to get the lighting right before she'd actually sit down to eat with him. The way she started talking about her career trajectory and her personal brand, like she was a corporation, not a person. But at the time, he told himself she was ambitious, driven, that her success would be their success, and he was proud of her for chasing her dreams. He worked long hours on construction sites, managing crews, dealing with delays and budget overruns and clients who changed their minds every other day. It was exhausting, physically demanding work that left him sore and covered in dust by the end of every shift. But he did it without complaint, because that's what you do when you're building a life. You sacrifice, you push through, you provide. He'd come home to find her on the couch with her laptop, still working, barely looking up when he walked in. He'd ask about her day, and she'd give him the highlights. A successful pitch, a difficult client, drama with a coworker. But it always felt like she was narrating a TV show, not sharing her life with him. Their traditions started to fade. They used to cook dinner together on Wednesday nights, trying new recipes and drinking cheap wine while music played in the kitchen. That stopped when she started going to networking events on Wednesdays. They used to take a weekend trip every fall to see the leaves change in the mountains. That stopped when her work retreats started falling on the same weekends. Thanksgiving and Christmas became obligations, performances for family and social media, not the cozy, intimate holidays he remembered from their early years together. And her friends changed. The college girlfriends she used to grab brunch with on Saturdays were gradually replaced by colleagues from work. She started talking about people he'd never met like they were characters in an ongoing drama. Becca from sales, who was going through a divorce. Marcus from the creative team, who was so funny and got her sense of humor. Tyler, the new director who was really going places and had taken her under his wing as a mentor. At first, he was glad she had a support system at work. Later, he'd wonder why none of these people had last names, why none of them had ever come over for dinner, why she always made them sound like they existed in a separate universe, one he wasn't invited to enter. She started working out more, coming home from the gym in expensive athletic wear with logos he didn't recognize. She got highlights in her hair, switched to a more sophisticated perfume, bought a whole new professional wardrobe. When he complimented her, she'd say it was for herself, that she was investing in her image. He believed her. He wanted to believe her, because the alternative, that she was dressing up for someone else, was too painful to consider. Their conversations became transactional. Did you pay the water bill? Can you pick up groceries? I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up. She stopped asking him about his day, locked showing interest in the projects he was managing or the problems he was solving. When he tried to talk about his own frustrations or dreams, she'd nod absently, her eyes drifting back to her phone, her mind clearly somewhere else. He felt like a roommate she tolerated, not a husband she cherished. The worst part was the contempt. Not the loud, explosive kind that ends in slammed doors and shouting matches. The quiet kind. The kind that showed up in the slight roll of her eyes when he shared an opinion. The condescending tone when she corrected him in front of others. The way she'd talk about blue-collar limitations at parties, as if the work he did, building actual things that people lived and worked in, was somehow less valuable than pushing marketing campaigns for products no one needed. He'd catch her scrolling through social media, double-tapping photos of exotic vacations and luxury cars and five-star restaurants. And he knew what she was thinking without her having to say it. This could be my life if I'd made different choices, if I'd married someone with more ambition, someone who fit into her world instead of making her explain his existence to her coworkers. But he held on. He held on because marriage isn't supposed to be easy, because everyone goes through rough patches, because the woman he fell in love with was still in there somewhere, beneath the career obsession and the social climbing and the phone that never left her hand. He held on because he made a promise, and he kept his promises. What he didn't know yet was that she'd already stopped holding on. She'd already checked out, and the distance he felt growing between them wasn't a phase or a rough patch or something they could fix with a weekend getaway and honest conversation. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And it was about to get so much worse. The real shift started about 9 months before that cold October night. It was subtle at first, easy to rationalize, easy to explain away. She started staying late at the office more frequently, texting him at 7, 8, 9 at night with vague messages. Still at work, team event, don't wait up. He'd eat dinner alone, watching whatever game was on, telling himself this was temporary. Big project, busy season. She was climbing the ladder, and ladders required sacrifice. Then came the happy hours. Every Thursday became team bonding night, which apparently meant drinks at upscale bars in the city, places with craft cocktails that cost $18 and names like The Velvet Rope or Midnight & Co. She'd come home past 11, heels in hand, makeup smudged, laughing about inside jokes he wasn't part of. When he asked who was there, she'd list names like they were supposed to mean something to him. Oh, you know, the usual crew. Becca, Marcus, Tyler, some people from the New York office. He didn't know. He'd never met them. She'd never invited him. Weekend retreats became a regular thing. It's mandatory, she'd say, packing a bag for some resort in Asheville or Charleston or Savannah. Team building, corporate culture stuff. I know it's annoying, but it's part of the job. He'd spend those weekends alone, mowing the lawn, fixing things around the house, trying not to think about what team building actually meant in a hotel 2 hours away with an open bar and no spouses invited. Her phone became a fortress. It was always face down on the table, always on silent, always just out of his reach. She changed her passcode without explanation. When he asked why, she said something about security protocols from her IT department, which sounded like an excuse, but also plausible enough that he didn't push. She started taking calls in the other room, closing doors, speaking in low tones he couldn't quite make out. When he walked in, she'd wrap up quickly. Work stuff, so boring, you don't want to hear about it. The physical distance grew alongside the emotional. She stopped initiating affection. No more casual kisses when he left for work. No more hand-holding on the couch during movies. Their sex life became sporadic, mechanical, something that happened when she was in the mood and disappeared entirely when she wasn't. When he tried to initiate, she'd sigh like he was being needy, like wanting intimacy with his wife was an inconvenience. I'm tired. I'm stressed. Can we not do this right now? He started noticing other things. She'd shower as soon as she got home from these late nights, immediately, before even saying hello properly. She'd do laundry herself now, something she used to complain about, taking loads straight from the washer to the dryer without leaving anything in the basket where he might see. Her car always smelled like air freshener, like she was covering something up. Cologne, maybe.
Or guilt. Their mutual friends started acting weird around him.
Awkward pauses in conversation. Sympathetic looks he didn't understand. One of her college friends, Jennifer, pulled him aside at a birthday party and asked if everything was okay at home. When he said yes, why? She just squeezed his arm and said, "If you ever need to talk," before trailing off into uncomfortable silence. He didn't know what she meant. Not yet. His in-laws added to the tension. Her mother called more frequently, always asking for her daughter, never spending more than 30 seconds on pleasantries with him. Her father, who'd never quite warmed to him anyway, became openly dismissive. At a family dinner, he made a joke about keeping up with his daughter's success, implying that he was somehow holding her back. Everyone laughed. She laughed. He sat there, fork halfway to his mouth, feeling like he was being erased. The holidays that year were painful. Thanksgiving dinner was a performance for social media. Perfectly plated food that no one really enjoyed because they were too busy staging photos. She posted a picture of the two of them smiling at the table, his arm around her shoulder, her hand on his chest, with a caption about gratitude and blessings. It got hundreds of likes. It was also the last time she touched him with anything resembling affection for weeks. Christmas was worse. They went through the motions: tree, lights, presents wrapped in coordinated paper, but there was no joy in it. She bought him practical gifts, things from a list he'd mentioned months ago, purchased online and shipped directly. No thought, no meaning. He'd spent weeks finding her the perfect gift, a necklace engraved with the coordinates of where he proposed, a reminder of who they used to be. She opened it, said, "It's nice," and set it aside. He never saw her wear it. By New Year's Eve, he was a ghost in his own house. She went to a party with her work friends, said spouses weren't invited, which was a lie he didn't discover until later. He stayed home, watched the ball drop alone, wondered when exactly he'd become so disposable. She came home at 3 a.m, makeup smeared, dress wrinkled, smelling like champagne and someone else's cologne. She didn't kiss him at midnight. She didn't kiss him at all. January and February were a blur of excuses. More late nights, more team events, more weekends where she was busy and he was alone. He started documenting things without really knowing why. Dates, times, inconsistencies in her stories. Like when she said she was at a work dinner on a Friday night, but her location services showed her at a downtown hotel. When he asked about it casually the next day, she snapped at him. "Are you tracking me now? That's creepy. I moved the dinner to the hotel bar because the restaurant was too crowded." It was plausible, barely, but the pieces didn't fit. They hadn't fit for months. One night in March, he found a receipt in her coat pocket. Not snooping, just hanging it up after she'd left it on the floor. A hotel bar receipt from one of her weekend retreats. 2 drinks, both expensive. But the timestamp was midnight. Wasn't team building supposed to end by 10? Weren't these things supposed to be professional? He put the receipt back, said nothing, felt something cold settle in his stomach. His own life became smaller. He stopped making plans because she'd cancel last minute. He stopped inviting friends over because she'd complain about the mess or the noise or the energy. He threw himself into work, taking on extra projects, staying late himself because going home to an empty house, or worse, a house where she was there but absent, felt like torture. His foreman, Danny, noticed. "You okay, man? You've been off lately." He lied, said he was fine, just busy. Danny gave him a look that said he didn't believe it, but wouldn't push. That was the thing about construction guys. They respected boundaries, even when they saw you drowning. But someone else didn't respect boundaries. Someone else was paying closer attention to what his wife was doing, what she was saying, and who she was saying it to. It was late April when his phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, one of their mutual friends from college. They weren't close anymore, just the kind of friends who liked each other's posts and caught up once a year. The message was short. "We need to talk, not over text. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow?" His gut twisted. Nothing good ever started with, "We need to talk." He agreed, suggested a place near his work site, tried not to think about what Ryan might say, tried not to let his mind go to the dark place it had been circling for months. That night, she came home late again, smiling, humming, in a good mood for the first time in weeks. She poured herself a glass of wine, scrolled through her phone, laughed at something he couldn't see. He watched her from the kitchen doorway, this stranger wearing his wife's face, and wondered if she even realized he was there. She didn't. She never did anymore. And tomorrow, he'd find out why. The coffee shop was busy, filled with the morning rush of professionals grabbing overpriced lattes before sitting in traffic. Ryan was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups in front of him, his expression grim. He looked like he hadn't slept well. He looked like he was about to ruin someone's life. "Thanks for meeting me," Ryan said as he sat down. No handshake, no small talk. "I need to show you something, and I want you to know I didn't want to be the one to do this. But if it was me, I'd want to know." He slid his phone across the table. A group chat already pulled up on the screen. "This is from a few weeks ago. Katie's in this chat. She doesn't know I'm in it too. Got added by mistake when they were organizing some event. I was going to leave, but then I started seeing, well, you'll see." His hands shook as he picked up the phone. The group chat was called Work Besties, which already made him feel sick. There were about 15 people in it, names he vaguely recognized from her stories. He scrolled up, reading messages that started innocuous enough: lunch plans, complaints about meetings, office gossip. Then he found the thread from 3 weeks ago. "Katie, honestly, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Going home feels like walking into a morgue." Becca, "Girl, you know you have options." Katie, "Don't even. He's so boring lately, like we have nothing to talk about. I come home from these amazing nights with you guys, and he's just there, waiting, like a puppy." Marcus, "Ouch, that's rough. Have you thought about couples therapy?" Katie, "Why would I pay someone to tell me what I already know? We're different people now. I've outgrown him." His vision blurred. He blinked, forced himself to keep reading. Tyler, "You deserve someone on your level, Kay. Someone who gets the life you're building." Katie, "Thank you. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be a bitch, but like, he works in construction. He comes home dirty and tired and wants to watch football. Meanwhile, I'm out here networking, building a career, trying to make something of myself. We're not compatible anymore." Becca, "So what are you going to do?" Katie, "I don't know. The prenup his family made me sign protects him if I leave. It's complicated." His breath caught. That wasn't true. Her family had demanded the prenup. Her father had insisted on it, said it would protect her future assets from a risky marriage. He'd signed it because he loved her, because he thought it was insulting but not worth fighting over. She'd flipped the script in her story, made herself the victim, made him the villain who'd forced her into legal protection. He kept scrolling.
The messages got worse. Katie. Honestly, if it wasn't for Tyler making work fun,
I'd lose my mind. At least someone appreciates me. Always, Kay. You know I've got your back. His hands clenched around the phone. Tyler, the mentor, the director who was really going places, the guy whose name came up in every other story she told. Ryan reached across the table, gently took his phone back. There's more, he said quietly. Private thread between her and Tyler. I only saw it because she sent a screenshot to the group chat by accident and deleted it fast, but I was quick. He pulled up another screen. This one made his stomach turn. Katie to Tyler. Last night was perfect. I needed that. Thank you for making me feel seen. Tyler to Katie. Anytime. You know how I feel about you, complicated or not. Katie to Tyler. I know. I just need to figure out my exit strategy. Can't afford to blow up my life until I know I'm protected financially. Tyler to Katie. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. The kiss emoji. Sent 2 days before their anniversary. An anniversary she'd forgotten entirely until he mentioned it that morning. He set the phone down carefully, afraid if he held it any longer, he'd throw it across the room. His ears were ringing. His chest felt tight, like someone was standing on it. Ryan was talking, saying something about being sorry, about how he'd struggled with whether to show him, about how he'd want to know. But the words were distant, muffled, meaningless. I need copies, he heard himself say. Can you send me screenshots? Everything. Ryan nodded. Already did. Sent them to your email before you got here. And, he hesitated, there's one more thing. Jennifer saw them together at a restaurant across town 3 weeks ago. She didn't know if she should say anything, but I convinced her you needed to know. She took a photo. His phone buzzed. He opened his email with numb fingers, clicked the attachment. There they were, his wife and Tyler, sitting in a booth at some dimly lit Italian place. Her hand on his arm, his hand covering hers, both of them laughing, leaning close, looking at each other the way she used to look at him 8 years ago in the mountains when he asked her to marry him. He made himself breathe. In, out. In, out. How long? He asked. I don't know, Ryan said. At least a few months, based on the chat history I could see. Maybe longer. I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry. He wasn't angry yet. The anger would come later, hot and sharp and consuming. Right now, he just felt hollow, betrayed by the person who promised to stand beside him through everything, mocked by her friends who'd never met him but had decided he was beneath her, humiliated by a prenup designed to protect her that she now twisted into a narrative where he was the bad guy. But beneath the hollowness, something else was forming, something cold and calculating. A plan. Don't tell anyone you showed me this, he said, looking up at Ryan. Not Jennifer, not anyone in that chat. I need time. Ryan frowned, confused but nodding. Okay, but what are you going to do? He stood up, pocketed his phone, left the coffee he hadn't touched. I'm going to deal with it, he said. For the next 5 months, he became someone he didn't recognize. Someone quiet, someone careful, someone who smiled when his wife came home late and nodded when she made excuses and pretended everything was fine, while building a case that would bury her. He started documenting everything with a lawyer's precision. Dates and times of her late nights, cross-referenced with her explanations and location data. He recovered old credit card statements, highlighted charges at hotels and restaurants on nights she said she was working late at the office. He made copies of receipts left in pockets and purses, photographed suspicious texts before she deleted them, tracked the mileage on her car against the distances she claimed to travel. He opened a separate bank account she didn't know about, started funneling money there slowly. Not hiding assets, the opposite. Protecting what he'd earned before she could claim it was marital property. The prenup was clear about that, but he wasn't taking chances. He photographed the prenup document itself, every page, every clause her father's lawyer had insisted on 8 years ago. The same clauses that would now work in his favor. He consulted a divorce attorney in a town 30 minutes away, someone she'd never accidentally run into. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s named Margaret, listened to his story with the weary patience of someone who'd heard variations of it 1,000 times. She reviewed the prenup, reviewed the evidence he'd gathered, and gave him a smile that was both sympathetic and predatory. "Your wife's family was thorough," Margaret said. "They wanted to protect her future earnings, her inheritance, her career trajectory. The prenup essentially walls off anything she makes or inherits from being considered marital property. It also caps spousal support at a laughable amount, and only if the marriage lasts 10 years or more." She looked up from the document. "You're at 8 years?" 8.5, he said. "And based on what you've shown me, there's evidence of infidelity and abandonment. Some states don't care about that anymore, but the prenup has a morality clause. Her father's addition, ironically. If she's found to have engaged in adultery, she forfeits any claim to spousal support entirely, and you split assets 50-50, with separate property remaining separate." Meaning? Meaning the house you bought together gets split, but anything you earned and saved separately stays yours. Anything she earned stays hers. And she can't touch your retirement, your business interests, or anything else you've built. She protected herself right into a corner. He felt something close to satisfaction, the first positive emotion in months. "What do I need?" "More evidence." Concrete proof of the affair. Text messages are good, but witnesses are better. Photos are great, but testimony is golden. If you can get her to admit it on record, even better. And whatever you do, don't tip your hand. Don't confront her. Don't change your behavior. Let her think everything is fine until we're ready to move. So he did. He became an actor in his own marriage, playing the role of oblivious husband, while his wife played the role of faithful spouse who just needed space and time to focus on her career. He watched her text Tyler in the living room, phone angled away, but not quite enough. He listened to her lie about where she'd been, who she was with, what time she'd be home. He said nothing. He noted everything. He befriended people she worked with on LinkedIn, casually, professionally. A few accepted, giving him access to photos and posts from company events she'd said spouses weren't invited to. Except there were spouses. Other people's husbands and wives, smiling in group photos at the same retreats she'd attended alone. More lies. More documentation. His friend Danny noticed he'd changed. "You're scary calm," Danny said one afternoon on the job site. "Like I've known you 10 years, and I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" "Like you already know how something's going to end, and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up." He smiled, didn't confirm or deny, just got back to work. At home, the distance became a chasm. She stopped pretending to care about maintaining appearances between them. The guest room became her room. She stopped asking about his day entirely. Their conversations were logistics and nothing more. "I'll be gone this weekend. We need groceries. Your mother called." She was pulling away, preparing for something, building her open exit strategy. But he was faster. He was smarter. And he had the one thing she'd forgotten about. The prenup her family had weaponized against him,
now aimed squarely at her.
By September, he had everything. A folder 2 inches thick with printed evidence. Financial records showing separate accounts and responsible management on his part. Testimony from Ryan and Jennifer willing to go on record. Photos, screenshots, receipts, timelines. A narrative so airtight that Margaret said it was the cleanest case she'd seen in years. "When do you want to file?" she asked during their final prep meeting. "Soon," he said. "I'm waiting for the right moment." That moment came in October, on a night when she stumbled home from another team event, reeking of wine and wearing guilt like cheap perfume. When she walked past him into the guest room, grabbed her pillow, and delivered her ultimatum like a CEO announcing layoffs. "I'm not sleeping with you anymore. Deal with it." She expected him to beg, to plead, to ask what he'd done wrong, how he could fix it, what he could change to win her back. She expected him to crumble the way she'd been trying to make him crumble for months. Instead, he just nodded, said, "Okay," and went to bed in the room they used to share. Alone, but not lonely. Because he knew something she didn't. He was already 3 steps ahead. And tomorrow, the game would change. Years ago, before they got engaged, before they signed any papers or made any promises, her father had invited him to dinner. Just the two of them, at an upscale steakhouse downtown, where the waiters wore ties and every meal cost what he made in a day. He'd known it was a test, a chance for the old man to size him up, decide whether a construction manager was good enough for his only daughter. The dinner was tense. Her father ordered for both of them, expensive cuts of meat and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his rent. He asked invasive questions disguised as small talk. "What are your career ambitions? Do you have a 5-year plan? How do you intend to support my daughter in the lifestyle she's accustomed to?" He answered honestly, said he was good at his job, planned to move into project management, wanted to eventually start his own contracting business. Stable work, good benefits, room to grow. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. Her father listened, sipped his wine, and finally said, "You seem like a decent young man, but Katie comes from a family with expectations, resources, a legacy. I'm sure you understand that we need to protect those things." He didn't understand, not fully, but he nodded. "If you're serious about marrying my daughter, we'll need you to sign a prenuptial agreement. It's not personal, it's just good business." It felt personal. It felt like being told he wasn't good enough, that his love came with terms and conditions, that his value could be reducing to numbers on a legal document. But he agreed, because he loved her, because he thought the prenup was a formality, an insulting but harmless piece of paper that would never matter because they'd be together forever. The prenup itself was brutal. 15 pages of legal jargon that basically said, what's hers stays hers, what's his stays his, and if things go south, nobody owes anybody anything except a tiny, insignificant amount of temporary support, and only if the marriage lasted 10 years or more. There was a clause about asset protection, a clause about inheritance, and buried on page 12, a morality clause that her father insisted on, saying that if either party engaged in adultery or morally reprehensible behavior, they'd forfeit any claim to spousal support. Her father's lawyer had smiled when he pointed that out. "It's mutual, protects both of you from each other's poor choices." He'd signed it at the kitchen table in her parents' house, her mother watching with pursed lips, her father looking satisfied, her standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop it. She'd hugged him afterward, whispered, "I'm sorry," into his ear, and promised it didn't change anything between them. But it did. It changed everything. Because in that moment, her family made it clear that he was a risk, an outsider, someone who needed to be legally contained before he could be welcomed into their world. And now, 8 years later, sitting across from Margaret in her law office with that same prenup spread out on the desk, He realized that the document meant to humiliate him would be the thing that saved him. "They really didn't think this through," Margaret said, tapping a highlighted section. "They assumed she'd be the high earner, that you'd be the one trying to claim her money. But you've been smart. You kept separate accounts. You didn't commingle finances beyond the basics. Your income has grown significantly. Bonuses, profit sharing from that business partnership you entered 3 years ago. According to this prenup, none of that is hers to claim. And the morality clause is going to destroy her. Because it's not just about proving she cheated. It's about proving she planned it, hid it, and mocked you in the process. The screenshots you have show premeditation. The photos show physical involvement. And the testimony from mutual friends shows a pattern of deception. A judge sees that, and she loses everything the prenup was supposed to protect." He felt a grim satisfaction. Not joy, he wasn't happy about any of this, but a sense of justice, of balance. "What's the next step? We file, we serve her, and we make sure it happens somewhere she can't ignore or hide from it." "I want it to be public," he said. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "How public?" "She's having a work event next week. Team dinner at that trendy place downtown, the one with the open floor plan and glass walls. She mentioned it last night. Said she'd be gone Friday evening. And you want to serve her there. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. That the people she's been lying to, me, her family, her co-workers, all deserve to know the truth." Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You're sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. It's going to be messy, emotional. She's going to react badly." "She already reacted badly," he said quietly. "She ended our marriage months ago. She just forgot to tell me while she was busy planning her next one." Margaret nodded. "Okay, let's make sure she remembers." The Friday night arrived cold and clear, the kind of autumn evening where the air smells like wood smoke and everything feels sharper. He stood across the street from the restaurant, watching through the glass walls as her team gathered inside. There she was, in a black dress he'd never seen, laughing with Tyler at the head of the table. Their boss was giving a toast. Everyone looked happy, successful, like they were celebrating victories and futures that didn't include spouses at home wondering where their partners were. The process server was a quiet woman in her 40s named Linda, who'd done this 1,000 times. "You're sure about the timing?" she asked. "Right after the toast," he said. "When they sit down, before appetizers arrive. I want her to have an audience, but not a scene." Linda nodded, checked her folder. "Divorce petition, prenuptial agreement, exhibit packet of evidence. She's going to have questions. She can ask her lawyer." Linda walked across the street, disappeared into the restaurant. He watched from the shadows, heart pounding, hands shaking from adrenaline and anger and grief all mixed together. This was it. The moment everything changed. The moment he stopped being a victim and became something else. He saw Linda approach the table, saw her lean down, say something to Katie, saw his wife's face shift from confusion to shock as Linda handed her the folder. She opened it right there, in front of everyone, because of course she did. She couldn't help herself. The first page was the divorce petition. The second page was the prenup, highlighted and annotated. The third page was a screenshot of her own words. "I've outgrown him." Her face drained of color. Her hands shook. Tyler leaned over, trying to see what she was reading, and she jerked the folder away. But it was too late. Their boss was asking what was wrong. Becca was staring. Marcus looked uncomfortable. The whole table had gone silent, watching her unravel in real time. She looked up,
scanned the restaurant, maybe trying to find him, but he wasn't inside. He was across the street, watching through glass, the way he'd watched his marriage die from a distance for months. Linda said something else, probably the legal notification that Katie was being formally served and had 30 days to respond. Then she left, professional and efficient, disappearing into the evening. Katie sat frozen, the folder open in front of her, her perfect work dinner ruined. Tyler put a hand on her shoulder. She shook it off. Someone asked if she was okay. She stood up abruptly, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the restaurant without another word. Her team sat there, confused and whispering, probably wondering what kind of drama they'd just witnessed. He watched her stumble onto the sidewalk, phone already to her ear, probably calling a lawyer, or her father, or maybe Tyler, though he was still inside. She looked small, shaken. Nothing like the confident woman who'd told him to deal with it a week ago. He turned and walked to his truck, parked 2 blocks away. He didn't feel victorious. He felt exhausted, sad, like he'd just watched something die that he'd spent years trying to save. But he also felt something else, relief, because the truth was out now. The lies were over.
And whatever happened next, at least it would be honest. His phone buzzed with texts. Her, calling and texting frantically. "What the hell is this? You can't be serious. Call me right now. We need to talk." He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He'd said everything he needed to say in 15 pages of legal documents, backed by months of evidence. Now it was her turn to deal with it. The courthouse was a cold, bureaucratic building that smelled like old carpet and stale coffee. Courtroom 4B was small, wood-paneled, with fluorescent lights that flickered slightly. This wasn't one of those dramatic trials you see on TV. There was no jury, no gallery full of spectators. Just a judge, 2 lawyers, and 2 people who used to promise forever, now sitting on opposite sides of the room. Katie looked different, thinner, paler, like the past 2 months had hollowed her out. Her lawyer was expensive, some partner at a downtown firm her father probably hired. His suit cost more than a mortgage payment. But even he looked resigned, like he'd read the case file and knew this wasn't a fight he could win. Margaret sat beside him, calm and prepared, a stack of folders organized by tab. "Remember," she whispered, "stay calm. Don't react emotionally. The evidence speaks for itself." The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and reading glasses that she peered over like she'd heard every excuse in the book. She reviewed the case summary, flipped through the prenup, glanced at the evidence packet. Then she looked up. "This is a petition for divorce based on irreconcilable differences, with allegations of infidelity and abandonment. Is that correct?" Margaret stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client is seeking dissolution of marriage under the terms of a prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in 2016. We have substantial evidence of adultery on the part of the respondent, which triggers the morality clause outlined in Section 8 and First 3 of said agreement." Katie's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client disputes the characterization of her relationship with a colleague as adulterous. She admits to an emotional connection but denies any physical affair. She believes the petitioner is misinterpreting private conversations and circumstantial evidence." The judge looked unimpressed. "Counselor, I've read the exhibit packet. There are explicit text messages, photographs of your client in intimate settings with this colleague, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Are you prepared to argue that none of that constitutes adultery under the definition used in this prenuptial agreement?" Katie's lawyer hesitated. "We believe the evidence is open to interpretation." "I don't." The judge flipped to a page in the evidence packet. Quote, "Last night was perfect. I needed that. "Thank you for making me feel seen," followed by a response of, "You know how I feel about you, complicated or not." These messages were sent between your client and Tyler Brennan, her co-worker. On a weekend, she told her husband she was attending a mandatory work retreat. She looked up. That's not interpretation. That's admission. Katie's face flushed red. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head. The judge continued, "And this morality clause. Let me be clear. I don't usually care about infidelity in divorce proceedings. Most states have moved to no-fault standards. But when parties sign a prenup with specific language about behavior and consequences, I enforce those agreements. You wanted the protection of a prenup, Ms. Brennan. You got it. That protection runs both ways." "Your Honor," Katie's lawyer tried again. "My client's family drafted that prenup under duress." "Stop." The judge held up a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence. Your client's family hired a prestigious law firm to draft this document. It was reviewed, negotiated, and signed voluntarily by both parties. No one was coerced. If anything, the evidence suggests your client's family wanted this exact outcome should she behave improperly. They just assumed she'd be the protected party, not the penalized one." Silence. Heavy, damning silence. The judge looked at Katie directly. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Katie stood, shaking. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I was unhappy. I felt trapped. I didn't handle things the right way, but I never meant to hurt anyone. I needed more than he could give me." It was the first time she'd spoken directly about it. The first time she'd admitted, even partially, that she'd done something wrong. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't even close. "That's not a defense," the judge said quietly. "That's an excuse. Marriage is a contract, Miss Brennan. You signed one with your husband, and another with your husband through this prenup. You violated both, and now you face the consequences outlined in the document you insisted he sign." She turned to Margaret. "The petitioner is seeking what?" "Division of shared assets per the prenup. Specifically 50-50 on the marital home. Separate property to remain separate. No spousal support due to the morality clause. Petitioner will assume his own debts and accounts. Respondent will assume hers." "And the respondent is contesting?" Katie's lawyer stood again, slowly. "We had hoped to negotiate a more equitable settlement." "Based on what?" "Your client forfeited her claim to support the moment she engaged in an extramarital affair. And the asset division is exactly what the prenup stipulates. There's nothing to negotiate. Unless you have new evidence that disproves the adultery allegations, we're done here." Katie's lawyer looked at Katie. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. There was no new evidence. There was only the truth, undeniable and documented, and staring back at her from every page in that folder. The judge signed several documents, stamped them with a heavy thud. "Divorce granted. Assets to be divided per prenup terms. No spousal support awarded. Both parties are legally separated as of today, with final dissolution in 90 days pending asset distribution." And just like that, it was over. 8 years of marriage ended in less than 30 minutes by a judge who'd seen 100 cases just like theirs. He felt numb, not triumphant, not vindicated, just tired. Katie tried to approach him as they left the courtroom. "Please," she said, "can we just talk? Somewhere private? I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain," he said quietly. "You made your choices. I made mine. The judge made hers. We're done." "But I never wanted it to end like this. I thought we could, separate amicably, move on with our lives." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked desperate, lost, nothing like the confident woman who'd told him to deal with it on that October night. "You wanted to move on," he said. You already did. You just wanted me to wait quietly while you figured out your next step. I'm not waiting anymore." He walked away, Margaret beside him, leaving Katie standing in the courthouse hallway with her expensive lawyer and her shattered plans. Outside, the winter sun was bright and cold. He took a breath, the first deep breath he'd taken in what felt like years. "You okay?" Margaret asked. "I will be," he said. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. The months after the divorce were brutal, but not in the way he expected. He'd prepared for the legal battle, the courtroom drama, the financial disentanglement. What he hadn't prepared for was the social fallout, the way their entire community seemed to split down the middle, choosing sides like they were captains picking teams for kickball. Katie's version of events spread fast. She painted herself as the victim of a cold, controlling husband who'd ambushed her with divorce papers and humiliated her in front of her colleagues. She left out the cheating. She left out the months of lying. She left out the contempt she'd shown him in text messages her friends had seen. Her version was clean, simple, and completely false. Some people believed her. Her family, obviously. They closed ranks, hired PR consultants, actual PR consultants, to manage the narrative around their daughter's divorce, as if it were a corporate scandal instead of a personal failure. Her mother sent him a scathing email about cruelty and vindictiveness, which would have been laughable if it hadn't been so insulting. Her father threatened legal action for defamation, which went nowhere because truth is an absolute defense. Her work situation imploded. Tyler, the work husband who was supposed to be her ticket to happiness, distanced himself immediately. Turns out he was married too, a detail Katie had conveniently overlooked or ignored. His wife found out about the affair through the divorce proceedings. Small social circles, mutual acquaintances, the way gossip always spreads in cities that pretend to be big but act like small towns. Tyler's marriage didn't survive either. And his career took a hit when HR started asking questions about inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Katie got quietly reassigned within her company. Not fired. Companies are too smart for that now, too afraid of wrongful termination suits. But she was moved to a different team, a less visible role. Her trajectory stalled indefinitely. The coworkers she'd bonded with, the ones in those group chats, suddenly became distant. Nobody wanted to be associated with the woman who blew up 2 marriages and became the subject of office gossip. She moved out of their house before the sale finalized, renting an apartment across town. He heard through mutual friends that it was small, sparse, nothing like the Pinterest-perfect aesthetic she used to curate. She stopped posting on social media entirely, her once active accounts going silent. The performance was over, and there was no audience left to impress. Meanwhile, his life slowly, painfully, started to rebuild. He kept the house through the initial separation period, though they'd eventually sell it and split the proceeds. Walking through rooms that used to hold memories, good ones, before everything turned toxic, was like living in a museum of someone else's life. But he couldn't leave yet. Not until the legal process finished. Not until he was ready. He started going to therapy, not because he thought he was broken, but because Margaret suggested it and it seemed like a smart move. His therapist, a straightforward guy named Dr. Miles, didn't coddle him, didn't tell him he was a victim or a hero, just helped him process the anger, the grief, the betrayal that sat in his chest like a stone. "You're mourning 2 losses," Dr. Miles said during one session. "The marriage you had and the marriage you thought you had. Those are different things. The first one ended months ago. The second one probably never existed the way you remember it." That hurt. But it was true. Looking back with clear eyes, he could see the cracks that had always been there. Her family's contempt, her need for status, the way she'd always seemed slightly embarrassed by his job, his background, his lack of interest in the social climbing she found so important. He'd ignored those things because he loved her. But love without respect isn't love. It's just need. And she didn't need him anymore. He reconnected with old friends, the ones who'd drifted away during the marriage because Katie found them boring or immature or not our crowd anymore. They welcomed him back without judgment, invited him to poker nights and weekend fishing trips and backyard barbecues where nobody cared about networking or image or who made more money.
It felt like coming home. Danny, his foreman, became a surprising source of support.
My first marriage ended badly too, Danny admitted one night over beers. Different reasons, but same feeling. Like someone rewrote the story you thought you were living. It gets better, man. Not fast, but it gets better. He took up hobbies he'd abandoned, started working out again, not obsessively, but enough to feel strong. Renovated parts of the house himself, tearing out the designer fixtures Katie had insisted on and replacing them with things that felt like him, practical, functional, honest. He didn't post about it online, didn't perform his healing for an audience, just did the work. The hardest part was running into people who knew both of them. Grocery stores, gas stations, the coffee shop near his office. Some people offered sympathy, awkward but genuine. Others avoided eye contact, probably unsure what side they were supposed to be on. A few made comments, little barbs disguised as concern. Such a shame about you two. I always thought you made a nice couple. I hope you're both happy now. He learned to smile politely and move on. Their opinions didn't matter. Their judgments didn't change the facts. One afternoon, about 4 months after the divorce finalized, he ran into Jennifer, the friend who'd taken that photo of Katie and Tyler at the restaurant. She was coming out of Target with her kids, looking tired and real in a way that Katie never allowed herself to look in public. "Hey," she said, genuinely surprised to see him. "How are you? And I mean actually, not the polite version." "I'm okay," he said. "Better than I was." She studied him, then nodded. "You look better. Less haunted." "Thanks, I think." She hesitated, shifting her shopping bags. "I want you to know, a lot of us saw what was happening. We just didn't know how to say something without making it worse. And I'm sorry about that."
You deserve better than what she did to you.
It was the first time someone from their mutual social circle had said it out loud, without qualifiers or both sidesism. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. "She's not doing well," Jennifer added, then caught herself. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about her." "It's okay. I'm not heartless. I don't wish bad things on her. I just wish she'd been honest instead of making me the villain in a story she wrote." Jennifer nodded. "For what it's worth, I think people are starting to see through it. Truth has a way of coming out." She smiled. "Take care of yourself. You were always too good for that whole scene anyway." She left, and he stood there in the parking lot, feeling something he hadn't felt in over a year. Hope. Not the naive hope of early marriage, where you think love conquers everything, but the harder, earned hope that comes from surviving something terrible and realizing you're still standing. By the time spring arrived, the house had sold, and he'd moved into a smaller place closer to the city, a renovated loft in an older building with exposed brick and big windows. It wasn't much, but it was his. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every decision made without compromise or consultation, or someone else's Pinterest board dictating his choices. He started hosting small gatherings. Nothing fancy, just friends coming over for grilled burgers and cheap beer, sitting on his patio under string lights he'd hung himself, talking about sports and work and normal life things that didn't require performing for social media. It felt human.
in a way his life with Katie never had toward the end. Danny and some guys from the crew became regulars. They'd show up on Friday nights with six-packs and stories from the job site, sprawling across his furniture without worrying about coasters or leaving rings on the table. His brother visited from out of state, stayed a weekend, told him he seemed lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. He started dating again, cautiously. A few coffee dates that went nowhere, one promising connection that fizzled after a month when he realized he wasn't ready for anything serious. He was learning to be alone without being lonely, to value his own company, to build a life that didn't depend on someone else's approval. Meanwhile, Katie's unraveling continued in ways he only heard about through the grapevine. Tyler's divorce had gotten ugly, and his ex-wife wasn't quiet about the affair. That information made its way through professional networks, country club circles, the interconnected web of middle-class Southern society, where everyone knows everyone's business. Katie tried dating Tyler publicly after both divorces finalized, maybe trying to prove the relationship had been worth destroying 2 marriages. It lasted 3 months before imploding. Turns out, relationships built on betrayal and ego and grass is greener fantasies don't have solid foundations. Tyler moved to another city for a job, leaving Katie behind without much ceremony. She'd burned her marriage for a man who couldn't even commit to staying in the same zip code. Her career never recovered the momentum she'd been so obsessed with. The reassignment became permanent. The promotions she'd been chasing went to other people. She switched companies eventually, took a lateral move to a smaller firm, quietly disappeared from the ambitious trajectory she'd once broadcast to anyone who'd listen. Her social media returned, but different. Less curated, more defensive. Posts about new chapters and learning from mistakes and finding yourself that read like someone trying to convince themselves they were okay. The comments were sparse, mostly from people who didn't know her well. The friends from those group chats, the ones she'd bonded with over mocking her boring husband, had moved on. He didn't follow her accounts, didn't check up on her. But information still filtered through because they still had mutual connections, still lived in overlapping social circles, even if they never directly interacted. He felt a distant pity for her, the way you might feel for a stranger who'd made catastrophic choices. But he didn't feel responsible. Her consequences were her own. One evening in early summer, about 9 months post-divorce, he was at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. He almost didn't go, but Danny convinced him it would be fine, that Katie probably wouldn't show up anyway. Except she did, arriving late with a guy nobody recognized, clearly trying to prove she'd moved on. They made eye contact across the yard. Her smile faltered. His stayed neutral. They didn't approach each other, didn't speak, just existed in the same space like strangers who happened to know each other's worst moments. He watched her interact with people who used to be their friends, saw the subtle distance in their responses, the way conversations ended a little too quickly. She'd burned more bridges than she realized, and now she was standing on the other side, wondering why everyone seemed so far away. Later, as he was leaving, she was standing alone near the driveway, her date having disappeared inside. She looked at him, opened her mouth like she might say something, then closed it. What was there to say? The words that mattered should have been spoken a year ago, before lawyers and courtrooms and irreversible decisions. He nodded once, acknowledgement, not hostility, and got in his truck. In the rearview mirror, he saw her watching him leave, and for a second he felt an echo of the old ache. Not for her, but for the version of themselves that could have been different if she'd chosen honesty over ego, if she'd valued their marriage over her image, if she'd realized what she had before deciding she deserved more. But that version never really existed. He understood that now, and understanding it, accepting it, was how he finally started to heal.
The coffee shop meeting happened on a random Tuesday in late summer, almost exactly a year after she'd told him to deal with it. He was grabbing coffee before heading to a job site when he saw her sitting alone in the corner, scrolling through her phone with the kind of exhausted focus that suggested she was avoiding something. She looked up as he walked past, their eyes meeting in that unavoidable way that happens in small spaces. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hey." He didn't sit down, didn't walk away either, just stood there holding his coffee, waiting to see if this was going somewhere or just an awkward moment they'd both forget. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Just for a minute, please." He glanced at his watch, then at the empty chair across from her. Against his better judgment, he sat. "What do you want, Katie?" She flinched at the directness. "I don't know, I see you sometimes, around town, at mutual things, and you look happy, or at least okay. And I wanted to..." She trailed off, searching for words. "I wanted to understand how." "How what?" "How you moved on so easily." He almost laughed. Easily. Like the last year hadn't been the hardest of his life. Like he hadn't spent months in therapy unpacking the damage, learning to trust again, rebuilding his sense of self-worth from the ground up. "I didn't move on easily," he said. "I moved on intentionally. There's a difference." She looked down at her coffee, which sat untouched and probably cold. "I know I hurt you. I know I handled everything wrong. And I'm not asking you to forgive me or give me another chance or anything like that. I need to know something." "What?" "If things had been different, if there was no money, no prenup, no history, if we were just two people meeting now, would you ever..." She looked up, eyes red-rimmed, desperate. "Would there be any chance?" It was the question she'd been carrying for months, maybe longer. The fantasy that if she could just rewind, just erase the consequences, they could start over, that the problem was the circumstances, not the character. He took a breath, chose his words carefully. "Katie, the prenup didn't end our marriage. Neither did the money or the jobs or the social pressure. You ended it when you decided I wasn't enough. When you looked at me and saw someone beneath you instead of beside you. When you chose to lie instead of communicate, to cheat instead of commit, to protect your image instead of our vows." "I know," she whispered. "I know I did all that. But I was confused. I was unhappy. I didn't know what I wanted." "And I'm supposed to be collateral damage while you figured it out?" She didn't answer. "You asked if there'd be a chance if things were different," he continued. "But things aren't different. You're still the person who made those choices, who said those things about me to people who'd never met me, who demanded a prenup to protect yourself from me, then played the victim when it protected me from you. That's not about circumstances. That's about who you are." "People change," she said, voice breaking. "Maybe. But not because they got caught. Not because the consequences hurt. You change when you genuinely see what you did wrong and work to become better. Not just to avoid punishment, but because you understand the damage you caused." He leaned forward. "Are you doing that work, Katie? Or are you just sorry it didn't work out the way you wanted?" She opened her mouth, closed it, started to cry, quiet tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "I don't know," she finally said. "I don't know who I am anymore without the career, without the marriage, without all the things I thought defined me." "Then figure it out," he said, not unkindly. "Go to therapy. Face what you did. Stop blaming the prenup or me or bad timing. Own your choices and their consequences. That's how you move forward." He stood up, left his coffee on the table. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. But it's not with me. It never will be again." She nodded, tears still falling,
looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it. I'm so sorry." "I know," he said, and he walked out, leaving her sitting alone in the coffee shop with her cold drink and her regrets and the wreckage of the life she'd built on lies. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. He got in his truck, sat for a moment, felt the weight of that conversation settle and then lift. There was closure in it, the kind he didn't know he needed. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. She was human, flawed, broken in ways she was only beginning to see, and that wasn't his responsibility to fix anymore. He started the engine and drove toward the job site, toward the work that grounded him, toward the life he was building, one honest decision at a time. And for the first time since that October night a year ago, he felt completely, genuinely free. 18 months after the divorce, he was sitting in his living room with a beer and a book when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just a link, no context. Curious, he clicked it. It was a blog post, one of those personal essay sites where people share their mistakes and lessons learned, usually searching for sympathy or validation, or both. The title was, "What I Lost When I Broke My Own Marriage." The author was anonymous, but he recognized the writing style immediately. Katie. He almost didn't read it, almost deleted the message and went back to his book. But something, curiosity, closure, morbid fascination, made him scroll down. The essay was surprisingly honest. She wrote about her obsession with status, her belief that she deserved more, without defining what that meant, her affair with Tyler, and how hollow it felt even while it was happening. She wrote about the prenup, the divorce, the public humiliation, and the isolation that followed. She didn't name him, didn't name anyone, but anyone who knew their story would recognize the details. The ending stayed with him. "I thought I wanted freedom. I thought my husband was holding me back from some better, shinier version of my life. What I didn't realize was that I was already living my life, and the person holding me back was me. I destroyed something real, chasing something fake. And now, I'm sitting in an apartment I can barely afford, working a job I used to think was beneath me, watching from a distance as the man I betrayed builds a life that looks nothing like what we had, and everything like what he deserves. There's no moral here except this. Respect isn't optional in a marriage. Loyalty isn't negotiable. And prenups don't protect you from your own character. If you're reading this, and you're in a relationship where you think your partner is the problem, look closer. Sometimes the problem is staring back at you in the mirror." He read it twice, set his phone down, stared at nothing for a long moment. It wasn't an apology exactly. It was accountability, which was rarer and more valuable. She was finally doing the work he told her to do in that coffee shop. Not for him, but for herself. And that, more than anything she could have said directly, felt like actual closure. He picked up his phone, typed a simple response to the unknown number. "Good luck. I mean that." Then he deleted the message thread, finished his beer, and went back to his book. Her story was hers to tell now. His story, the one he was living, building, choosing every single day, was his own. 2 years after the divorce, he was a different man in the best possible way. Not bitter, not broken, just wiser, more careful, more intentional about who he let into his life and what he was willing to accept. He'd started his own contracting business, something he'd talked about for years but never had the confidence to pursue. It was small, just him and a couple guys from his old crew. But the work was steady and the reputation was growing. He'd built 3 custom homes from the ground up, renovated a dozen more, and had a waiting list of clients who valued his honesty and craftsmanship. He wasn't rich, but he was comfortable, proud, and in control of his own trajectory.
His loft had become a real home. Furniture that fit his taste, not someone else's aesthetic. Photos on the walls of people he actually cared about. His brother's family, fishing trips with Danny. A framed shot of the first house he'd built under his own company name. It was lived in. Real. The kind of space where you could put your feet up and not worry about disturbing some carefully curated image. He'd been seeing someone for about 6 months. Her name was Rachel, a teacher he'd met through mutual friends at one of those backyard barbecues that had become a regular part of his life. She was kind, funny, unpretentious, in a way that felt refreshing after years of performative perfection. She didn't care about his job title or his bank account. She cared about how he treated people, how he showed up when things got hard, how he made her laugh when she'd had a rough day with difficult students. They took things slow. No pressure, no games. Just two people figuring out if they fit together without forcing it. She knew about Katie, about the divorce, about the betrayal. She listened without judgment and never tried to compete with a ghost. "I'm not interested in being compared to your ex," she said once. "I'm interested in being with you, now, as you are." That honesty, that clarity, felt like a gift he didn't know he'd been missing. One Saturday afternoon, he was hosting a small barbecue at his place. Rachel was there, helping him prep burgers while Danny and a couple of other friends set up chairs on the patio. His brother had driven in with his wife and kids,
who were running around the living room with the kind of chaos that made the space feel alive. "This is nice," Rachel said, squeezing his hand as they watched everyone gather. "You've built something good here." He looked around at the people who mattered, the life he'd constructed from the ruins of his marriage, and nodded. "Yeah, I have." Later, as the sun set and the string lights flickered on, his brother pulled him aside. "You seem happy, man. Really happy. Not just getting through it happy, but genuinely good." "I am," he said, surprised by how true it felt. "You know, I was worried about you after everything went down. Thought you might get stuck in bitterness or shut down completely. But you didn't. You did the work. Had to. The alternative was becoming someone I didn't want to be." His brother smiled, clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, you did good. Katie lost more than she'll ever understand. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Honestly, it didn't matter anymore. Her loss wasn't his problem to solve or dwell on. He'd built a life that didn't require her approval, didn't measure success by her standards, didn't hinge on anyone's validation but his own. As the night wore on and people ate too much, drank a little too much, laughed at dumb jokes, and told stories that would become memories, he felt something settle in his chest. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters at the first sign of trouble, but the deep, earned kind that comes from surviving the worst and choosing to build something better. Katie had asked him in that coffee shop if things could be different. The answer was no. Not because he was heartless, but because he'd already moved forward into a life where the question didn't matter, where the past was a lesson, not a life sentence, where love meant partnership, not performance, where respect wasn't negotiable and loyalty wasn't optional. He'd dealt with it, just like she'd told him to, but on his terms, with his dignity intact, and with a future that finally felt like his own. So what do you think about this story? Have you ever been in a relationship where you realized too late that respect was missing? Where someone you loved treated you like a safety net while they chased something shinier? Or maybe you've been the person who had to serve those papers, take that stand, choose yourself when someone else
had already chosen to leave. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what state you're watching from, and if this story moved you, if it reminded you that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing. Hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that self-respect isn't selfish, that protecting yourself isn't cruelty, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply building a life so good that you stop caring about revenge at all. Because here's the truth this story teaches us. Love without respect is just a contract waiting to be broken. Loyalty without honesty is just performance art. And sometimes the very things people weaponize against you, like a prenup designed to keep you down, become the exact tools that set you free. If you want more real-life stories about relationships, betrayal, justice, and the messy, complicated process of rebuilding your life when everything falls apart, subscribe. Hit that notification bell, because we're just getting started, and the next story might be the one that changes how you see your own life. Take care of yourselves, value yourselves, and remember, you don't have to shrink to fit into someone else's version of who you should be. The right people will meet you where you are. The wrong ones will make you feel small for being yourself. Until next time.